I finally bought a house. Small, simple, but mine. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. You'd think that meant freedom, peace. But peace is a strange echo when your past still whispers. I grew up in a storm, a mother lost in alcohol, love twisted into fear. I left it all behind at 18. No contact, no looking back. But then the call came. She was homeless, crying, begging me to let her in. I hesitated. My silence screamed louder than her voice. Was I heartless, or just trying to survive? People judged me, but they didn't live my story. I remember the silence more than the noise. Not because there wasn't yelling, there was plenty of that. Screaming, glass breaking, drunken footsteps stumbling down the hall. But the silence, that was worse. The kind of silence where I held my breath, listening for the click of a door, the slosh of a bottle, the sound of her mood changing like a sudden storm. That silence was a warning, a shadow that moved before the chaos began. When I bought this house, it wasn't just real estate. It was oxygen. It was mine. The first lock I ever turned where I didn't have to fear who might barge in. The first time I slept without waiting for slurred footsteps outside my door. No one understands what that kind of peace costs when you come from a war zone that pretended to be a family. My mother was the center of every room. Loud, messy, unpredictable. And I was the invisible one, unless she needed someone to blame. She never remembered what she said when she drank, or maybe she did and just didn't care. I was 9 the first time I thought she might be dead, sprawled on the kitchen floor, lips pale, reeking of vodka and regret. I shook her, called her name, crying so hard I could barely breathe. She came to eventually, laughed even, told me to stop being so dramatic. That moment stayed with me, like a scar under the skin no one can see. You see, when people talk about childhood, they usually mean playgrounds and birthday parties, scraped knees and bedtime stories. I never had that. I had secrets. I had lies. I had to become the adult before I ever got to be a child. I was the one who cleaned up the mess, both literal and emotional. I was the therapist, the maid, the target. And when you grow up in a house like that, you learn something most people don't. Survival is quiet. It doesn't cry out for justice or scream for help. It tiptoes. It adapts. It hides. That's what I did for 18 years. I survived. Then I ran. At 18, I left and never looked back. No goodbye, no apology. Just a bag in my hand and a silence that screamed freedom. People think trauma is just about the big moments, the bruises, the broken things. But it's the little things that haunt you. The way your hands shake when someone raises their voice. The way you flinch at the smell of alcohol. The way you doubt yourself, even when you're safe, because your definition of safe was never real to begin with. So when I say that this little house, this quiet, humble space, is the first time I've truly felt alive, I mean it. I didn't just buy a house. I claimed a life where I don't walk on eggshells, a life where I don't wonder if love is just pain in disguise. But peace is a fragile thing when your past knows your number. One phone call can bring it all back. And that call came. Her voice, slurred and soaked in tears, pulled me right back to that cold kitchen floor. And suddenly, I wasn't a grown woman with keys to her own home. I was 9 again, holding my breath in the dark. The world outside never really saw her. To them, she was charming, quirky even, the kind of woman who could hold a room with laughter, make strangers feel like friends. She wore her pain like a perfume, strong, dizzying, covering something rotten underneath. And she always knew how to play the part when it counted. Like the time my 5th grade teacher called Child Protective Services. I remember the visit like a scene from a movie. The clipboard, the soft, careful questions. The subtle glance tore the bruises I tried to hide. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this was my way out. Maybe someone finally saw me. But she saw them coming, too. She sobered up just long enough to put on the show. Clean house, sweet smile, motherly concern. She baked a pie. She laughed at the right moments. She even put on makeup. I stood beside her, heart pounding, not knowing which lie I was supposed to agree with. And they left. They left. And when the door shut behind them, her eyes changed. She didn't yell that night. That would have been merciful. No, she was quiet, cold, her voice like a knife sliding through silk. "You like telling stories, don't you?" she whispered. "You like making me look bad. What came after wasn't loud, but it carved deeper than any scream ever could. She didn't hit me. She didn't have to. Her words were worse. They planted themselves like seeds of shame in my skin. And I believed her. That it was my fault. That I was the reason people looked at her funny. That love was conditional. Something to earn. Something I always seem to get wrong. People say children are resilient. That they bounce back. But they forget. Some of us never got the chance. We didn't bounce. We broke quietly, in places no one could see. After that day, I stopped hoping anyone would save me. I became what she needed, obedient, invisible, emotionally available. A mirror for her pain, a sponge for her rage. I learned to read her moods before she even opened her mouth. I cleaned the messes. I swallowed the shame. And I never told anyone anything again. Because if the people who were supposed to help didn't believe me then, why would they now? And maybe that's why the guilt hits so hard today. Because when she called me, years later, saying she had nowhere to go, part of me still flinched like that little girl, caught between loyalty and survival. She begged me like I was the parent, like I was the one who owed her shelter, comfort, compassion. And maybe I do. Maybe some invisible rule says you always open the door for your mother, no matter how many times she burned the house down. But then I think about that pie she baked. The perfect lie. And I remember, I've seen her at her best. I've seen the mask. And I've lived with what happens when it slips. So when people say, but she's your mother, I wonder if they'd still say that if they knew the kind of mother she was. Not the version she shows to the world, but the one who weaponized silence, who turned love into fear, who taught me to disappear inside my own home. This isn't just about a phone call. This is about the part of me that's still healing from the last time I said yes. I left home the day I turned 18. No ceremony. No dramatic exit. Just the quiet click of a door closing behind me and a vow I whispered only to myself, never again. I didn't take much, just a duffel bag and the scraps of a soul I wasn't sure how to put back together. I didn't have a plan. Only the certainty that staying would kill something in me that was already barely holding on. People talk about escape like it's this triumphant moment. Fireworks. Closure. A final breath of freedom. But it wasn't like that. It was cold. It was terrifying. It was the loneliest freedom I've ever known. No one asked where I went. No one tried to stop me. And my mother, didn't call. Not that night. Not that week. Not for years. Her silence, in some twisted way, felt like confirmation. That I'd never really mattered. That my absence made life easier, not harder. I drifted through those first years like a ghost. Alive, technically, but not fully living. I was free, yes. But freedom, when all you've ever known is survival, feels like floating without an anchor. I didn't know how to exist in stillness. How to trust safety. I waited for storms that never came. Flinched at kindness, sabotaged peace before it had a chance to settle. It took me years, to realize that what happened to me wasn't normal. That my childhood had a name, trauma. That the fear, the shame, the bone-deep guilt, they weren't personality traits. They were scars. Therapy helped. Not at first. At first, I hated it. I hated how the silence in the room felt too familiar. I hated the way questions peeled back, layers I thought I'd buried for good. But slowly, like ice melting, something began to shift. I started telling the truth, not the polished version, but the raw, jagged one. I grieved the childhood I never had. I learned how to say no without apologizing for it. I built a life. Slowly, carefully. I pieced together a version of myself that didn't revolve around her moods, her needs, her chaos. I got a job. I made friends. I laughed without flinching. And finally, I bought that little house. A sanctuary, a promise made physical. And then, just like that, she came back. It started small. A birthday text after 10 years of silence. Then a few calls. Surface-level conversations where I said just enough to be polite, but not enough to open a door. I could feel her testing the edges, trying to find a crack. I didn't let her in. Not emotionally. Not physically. But I didn't shut her out completely either. Part of me still wanted to believe she'd changed. That maybe she was sober. That maybe time had softened the rough edges, and that the woman on the other end of the line wasn't the same one who left bruises on more than just skin. But the truth has a sound. I heard it in her voice the night she called, slurring, sobbing, saying she had nowhere to go. It was the same voice I remembered from the kitchen floor. The same desperation. The same manipulation dressed up as need. And my body, before my mind could even catch up, froze. Because healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. And sometimes, when the past knocks on your door, it sounds just enough like home to make you question everything you fought to forget. I told her no. 2 syllables that shook something deep in me, like an old structure cracking after years of pressure. It wasn't loud. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I just said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." And then came the explosion. Her voice, once soft and broken, turned sharp, venomous. "You cold-hearted bitch," she spat. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" That line, that familiar, twisted logic, it hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. After everything I've done for you. What exactly had she done? Raised me in fear? Made me clean up her vomit while she screamed that I ruined her life? Was that her definition of love? She kept going, words like knives, accusing me of cruelty, of abandonment, of turning my back on my own blood. And when she hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at my hands, feeling a guilt that didn't belong to me crawling up my spine like ivy. But the worst part wasn't her voice. It was what came next. The others. Family members I hadn't heard from in months. Cousins, aunts, even a sibling who barely knew me. Suddenly, my phone lit up with messages. Accusations. Pleas. Guilt wrapped in scripture and shame. "She's your mother. She has nowhere to go. What kind of daughter lets her own mother sleep in her car?" The answer was simple, the kind of daughter who has slept in fear for most of her life. But try explaining that to people who only knew the version of her that laughed at weddings and hugged too tight at Christmas. They didn't see the empty bottles. They didn't see me trying to stop her from driving drunk. They didn't hear the name she called me or the way she blamed me for the father who left. And none of them, offered to take her in. They just wanted me to. Because in their minds, I was safe now. I had a house, a life. Surely I could afford to be kind. But kindness isn't the same as self-destruction. And forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. They didn't understand that letting her into my home wasn't just about a place to sleep. It was opening the door to the chaos I'd spent years escaping. It was risking my healing, my peace, my stability. All for someone who still hadn't taken responsibility for the damage she left behind. And maybe that's the part that hurt the most. Not that she asked, but that she expected. Expected me to sacrifice my safety for her comfort. Expected me to forget the years I spent surviving her storms. Expected me to still be that quiet girl with shaking hands and a bleeding heart. But I'm not her anymore. I've built this life piece by piece, brick by brick. Not just the house, but the version of myself who knows how to say no and not unravel afterward. And still, the guilt lingers, like smoke in a room long after the fire's out. Because it's hard to rewire the part of you that still wants to be loved by the one who hurt you most. Harder still to admit that love without boundaries is just another form of bondage. So yes, I said no. Not because I don't care, but because I finally care enough about myself to close the door and keep it closed. Some nights, the silence feels different now. Not like the silence I grew up with, the kind that trembled before a storm, but a sacred stillness, a space where I can finally hear myself think, feel, breathe. And in that silence, I'm learning something I never thought I would. Peace is not the absence of pain. It's the presence of boundaries. I used to think healing would feel like forgetting. Like waking up one day and realizing the past didn't matter anymore. But healing is slower than that. Messier. It's choosing, over and over again, not to return to what broke you, even when it cries out like a ghost in the night. Some days I still hear her voice. Not in real time, but in memory. Sharp, manipulative, sometimes even loving. And that's what makes it confusing. Because trauma doesn't always come wrapped in cruelty. Sometimes, it comes in moments of twisted affection, when she'd hold me after screaming at me, or kiss my forehead with liquor still on her breath. I clung to those rare, soft moments like lifelines. Because as a child, any love, even broken love, was better than none. But I'm not a child anymore. And I no longer mistake survival for love. When she called me selfish, I almost believed her. The old me would have rushed in, tried to fix everything, let her back in, and convinced myself it was just for a little while. But a little while always turned into a storm. And I've weathered too many of those already. People talk about honoring your parents like it's a sacred, unquestionable duty. But they forget something. Honor doesn't mean surrendering your soul. Forgiveness doesn't mean sacrificing your future. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. I can love her from a distance. I can grieve the mother I never truly had. And I can still say no. That is healing. And here's what I've realized, maybe for the first time in my life. I am not heartless. I am not cruel. I am not broken for choosing peace. I am brave. Brave for walking away from the guilt that was never mine to carry. Brave for building something new out of ruins. Brave for believing that I deserve a life not built on fear or obligation, but on freedom and choice. This little house, this quiet place, it's more than just shelter. It's a monument to every step I took away from her chaos and toward my own clarity. And even when the echoes of the past come knocking, I know now that I don't have to answer. Because my healing doesn't require her permission. My peace doesn't depend on her apology. And my story, this story, is mine to write. So no, I'm not the villain in this tale. I'm the survivor, the boundary setter, the one who finally said enough. And that's not cruelty. That's courage. I know what you're thinking. She's my mother. She's alone. She's desperate. And I turned her away. Some will say I'm heartless. That no matter what happened in the past, family is family. That I should have opened my door, if not out of love, then out of basic human decency. But is it heartless to protect your peace? Is it cruel to choose healing over history? Because that's the decision I made. Not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but out of the quiet, trembling understanding that some cycles don't break unless someone finally says no. Yes, I told her she couldn't stay. Yes, I closed my door. But behind that door is the only version of safety I've ever known. A version I built with trembling hands and years of therapy, piece by fragile piece. I didn't scream. I didn't shame. I didn't wish her harm. I simply drew a boundary and held it. And yet, I still wonder, was I wrong? That's where you come in. Was I wrong for refusing to let my alcoholic, emotionally abusive mother move into my home after she was evicted, knowing full well the trauma she's caused, the chaos she brings, and the years I've spent trying to heal? I know what I lived. I know what it cost me. But now I ask you, Ida,